Eva stepped quietly into the room where the reading of the will was already underway. "Get lost. Gold digger." The words cut through the air like a sharp blade slicing deep into her chest. The laughter and whispers that followed felt like cold winds swirling around her, chilling, yet strangely distant. The grand hall was filled with polished faces, relatives, and business partners dressed in their finest, their eyes narrowing as they regarded her like an unwelcome shadow. Eva's gray linen dress swayed softly as she moved forward, the worn cardigan around her shoulders, carrying the weight of years she didn't need to explain. No jewelry caught the light. No makeup masked her calm resolve. They saw a stranger, a nuisance. Someone to mock, to photograph in secret, to whisper about behind her back. A charity case. One young woman giggled as she snapped a photo, already crafting a cruel caption on her phone. But Eva didn't flinch. She didn't answer, because she carried a quiet truth that no sneer could erase. She wasn't here to prove her worth. She was here to watch them reveal theirs. And in just a few moments, the very people laughing would be silenced not by words, but by truth. Have you ever felt unseen, dismissed, or judged before your story was told? Stay with us, because Eva's journey isn't just about inheritance, it's about dignity, strength, and the courage to stand firm when the world doubts you. The room was designed for spectacle. Vaulted ceilings, chandeliers dripping with crystals. Every detail oozed old money, polished, curated, sterile. It wasn't a place that welcomed outsiders, especially not ones like Eva Monroe. She took her seat in the back corner alone, unnoticed by anyone who wasn't laughing at her. A middle-aged woman in a pastel suit whispered into her friend's ear loud enough for Eva to hear. She could at least try to look appropriate. "Did she walk in off the bus stop?" The friend chuckled. "Maybe she's here to dust the curtains." More laughter. Eva didn't react. Someone coughed on purpose, clearly mocking her presence. A man in a navy blazer pulled out his phone, angled it with practiced arrogance, and snapped a photo. The caption appeared moments later on his feed. "When the help doesn't get the memo, it's not her day." He even tagged the location that had Harwood legacy. Another woman, young, sharp-jawed, probably no older than 30, passed Eva on her way to the refreshment table. She dropped something casually into Eva's open tote bag as she walked by. No one noticed. No one but Eva. Later, when the room quieted and the speeches began, Eva reached into her bag and found it. A small note. One line scratched in heavy ink, charity case. She folded the paper calmly, tucked it away, like a wound you've already learned to live with. No one in that room knew the strength it took not to cry, not to lash out, to absorb cruelty in silence and remain standing. That kind of silence is not weakness, it's restraint, it's strategy. And Eva had learned long ago silence tells people who they are better than any words ever could. She watched them, these so-called heirs and dignitaries, so polished on the outside. But the moment they thought no one important was watching, their masks slipped. A man with slicked-back hair, Preston, she remembered loudly, recalled to his friend how Nathaniel had a soft spot for strays. He gestured vaguely toward her. "Maybe she's just another one of his projects." His friend laughed, then added, "Well, if she is, the project failed. Look at her. Dressed like grief itself. It wasn't just the men. Vanessa, a niece of Nathaniel's by marriage, led her own circle of whispered venom. "She's a nobody," she hissed. "Probably showed up hoping for a check. I bet she barely knew him. These people cling to legacies like gum on a shoe." She sipped champagne like punctuation. Still, Eva said nothing, because the truth wasn't just coming. It was already written, signed, sealed, waiting. And when it would finally be read, when the room would realize that the woman they mocked, dismissed, humiliated, was the one they all depended on. She wanted to remember this. She wanted to remember every voice, every chuckle, every poisoned look, because that's what they gave her freely. Not respect, but proof. Have you ever held your dignity while the world tried to strip it away? What did that silence cost you? Stick around. This is where it starts to unravel. It began with a shuffle of papers. Nothing dramatic, just the sound of a man in a gray suit adjusting his notes. Douglas Granger, longtime legal counsel for the Harwood family, cleared his throat gently at the front of the room. The chandelier's crystals gave a soft clink, like they too were bracing for impact. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice calm, "thank you all for being here today as we honor the final wishes of Mr. Nathaniel Harwood." A ripple of murmured anticipation. Some leaned forward. Others scrolled their phones expecting a predictable division of wealth. Stocks, properties, companies. A token nod to charity. Nothing they hadn't gamed out already. And yet... Granger's next words made the room go still. In accordance with the sealed last testament, the entirety of Mr. Harwood's personal estate, including all real assets, business holdings, and proprietary interests, will be transferred to one beneficiary. He paused. He wasn't stalling. He was giving them a moment to breathe, though most held it instead. Whispers buzzed. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Preston smirked. Granger glanced down. Read slowly, clearly. "To my wife. My legal spouse. Eva Monroe." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was confusion stuck between breath and comprehension. Eva didn't move, but the room did. "What did he say?" someone hissed. Vanessa scoffed. "Wife? What wife?" "She's not his wife," a man blurted. "That's ridiculous. This must be some mistake. It's a scam," someone else said. "She's scamming us." Eva sat still, her hands folded, her gaze fixed. She hadn't blinked. Granger, unfazed by the rising agitation, continued. "This decision was notarized, documented, and updated as recently as 9 months ago. All legal protocols were followed." Preston stood up red-faced. "Where's the proof, then? You can't just walk in here and hand the empire over to someone like that." Douglas raised one brow, measured, unimpressed. "Of course," he said. "You'll have your proof." From a leather-bound folder he pulled out document after document. Slowly, methodically. The kind of method that makes liars sweat. A marriage certificate, dated and verified. Photographs of a quiet wedding Eva in a simple navy dress, Nathaniel in a gray suit with a crooked smile. Not a showy affair, but intimate. Real. Letters, handwritten by Nathaniel, some to Eva, some to Douglas, some to himself. They spoke of trust, of faith, of choosing the one person who stayed when no one else did. One of them read, "She never wanted the fortune. That's why she deserves it." A shared bank account, regular deposits, insurance beneficiaries, witness signatures, all sealed, dated, consistent. And finally, Granger pressed a remote. A large screen behind him lit up. A video. Grainy but clear. Nathaniel Harwood sat beside Eva in a small chapel 7 years earlier. He turned to her nervous suite, took her hand. "I know this won't make sense to everyone," his voice crackled, "but I know what's true. And what's true is you." The vows were simple, honest. The kiss afterward brief but unmistakably tender. The screen went dark. No one said a word. Eva looked forward. Still didn't speak. Because the silence now wasn't hers anymore. Have you ever witnessed a truth so undeniable it rewrote every lie spoken before it? The masks are starting to slip. But the worst is still to come. The papers alone should have been enough, but they weren't. Because for people like Vanessa Preston and the rest of the room's well-manicured skeptics, proof was never about what was true. It was about what they were willing to accept. And they weren't ready. Not yet. Vanessa stood up, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Anyone could forge those. A marriage certificate. Letters, photos. She turned toward the room, looking for allies. "You really believe that is enough?" Granger didn't blink. "That's why there's more." He picked up a black flash drive and inserted it into the projector. I was instructed to play this only if the will was challenged. He glanced at Eva, then back to the crowd. And I believe we are now well past that point. The screen flickered to life. This time it wasn't grainy like the wedding video. It was recent. Crystal clear. Nathaniel Harwood appeared sitting in a leather armchair in the library most of them knew well. His face was older than in the photos, but sharp. Tired eyes, but still piercing. If you're watching this, he began, then you've just heard the part where I leave everything to my wife, Eva Monroe. A pause. I imagine some of you are already plotting ways to overturn it. Chuckles rippled through the room, nervous restrained. Nathaniel continued, but I want to make something clear. Eva didn't ask for this. She didn't marry me for the money. She didn't even want to be in that room today. I asked her to, because I needed to know when I was gone who the monsters really were. The air thickened. I built this empire with blood, grit, and more sacrifice than you'll ever know, and I won't see it handed to cowards wearing silk smiles. Eva is the only one who stayed, the only one who never changed her tone based on my balance sheet. He leaned forward, expression tightening. If any of you question her place here, let me help you. A new clip played. Home security footage. Nathaniel in a hospital bed months earlier, his voice, weak breath strained. Eva beside him, spoon-feeding soup-brushing hair from his forehead, kissing his temple without knowing a camera was even watching. Then another clip, him laughing, watching her dance barefoot in the kitchen. The camera wasn't hidden, it was just forgotten, and she never played to it, because that's who she was, even when no one was looking. Another clip. One night, she sits on the porch steps, alone, whispering, not knowing the outdoor camera had picked it up. I don't care what they say. I love him, even if I have to sit in the back row at my own husband's funeral. Someone in the room gasped. Preston lowered his eyes. Vanessa's arms dropped to her sides. The screen faded to black. For a long, suspended moment, there was nothing. Then, Granger turned off the projector, turned toward the room. The evidence is no longer a matter of dispute, he said plainly. Eva Monroe is the legal and rightful heir to Mr. Harwood's estate. If there are any further challenges, I am authorized to begin litigation. And he gestured toward the security footage to make all these recordings public. A single sentence that carried more weight than shouting ever could. The room, so loud earlier, was now quieter than a church before a funeral. Not one person spoke, not even Vanessa. Eva still hadn't moved. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just breathed, steady, as if this had all happened before, as if she'd lived through this 100 times, just not in a room this bright. She looked at no one, but somehow, everyone felt seen. They thought truth would tremble when tested. But the truth, when rooted in love, quiet dignity, and patience, never flinches. It should have ended there. With the footage, the documents, the voice of Nathaniel himself making everything unshakably clear. But Eva hadn't stood yet. Not because she was uncertain, but because she was waiting. Waiting for them to see what kind of people they'd become when they thought power had no eyes on them. And now they had. Granger gathered the papers with practiced precision. The projector was off. The silence was total. That's when Vanessa stood again, only this time slower. Less defiant. More searching. I don't understand, she said. If he loved you so much, why keep it a secret? Why hide you from us? Eva finally looked up. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, unrushed. It wasn't a secret, she said. You just never cared to look past yourselves long enough to notice. The sentence floated like smoke, gentle but choking. She rose from her chair, and the room shifted. No longer the outcast in linen and a faded cardigan. Now she was gravity, and every gaze was pulled toward her. Vanessa stammered, "Are you saying this was some kind of test?" Eva's lips curved, neither smile nor smirk, just acknowledgement. "No," she said softly. He was the one being tested. Before anyone could respond, the doors at the back of the hall opened, and Nathaniel Harwood, very much alive, walked in. Gasps, audible, scattered. One woman knocked over her glass. Another whispered a half prayer. He walked slowly, a cane in his left hand. But his presence was unshaken. The weight of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa stepped back as if from a ghost. Nathaniel stopped beside Eva and took her hand. "I apologize," he said to the room, "for the deception. But if I'd told the truth, would I have seen yours?" No one answered. He looked at Vanessa. "You led the charge, didn't you?" Her eyes welled. I didn't know." He turned to Preston. "You were first to laugh." Preston looked away. "I thought I know what you thought," Nathaniel cut in, "and I'm glad you did, because now I know who you are without the mask." He looked across the sea of pale faces. "For years I've been surrounded by people who smiled too easily, called me family with one breath and plotted their inheritance with the next. Eva was the only one who never asked for a cent, the only one who stayed when I was sick, when I was difficult, when I was done pretending to be strong." He looked down at Eva, his voice catching slightly, and she told me something I couldn't forget. Eva nodded once as if silently giving him permission. Nathaniel turned back to the room. "She told me that no fortune is worth a room full of false love." Then he raised their hands, fingers interlocked. "She didn't pass this test. You did. Just not in the way you think." The message was clear. They had revealed who they were. And the empire they once saw as a reward now stood as a mirror to their own failure. Vanessa wiped a tear, but said nothing. Preston sat down hard, his hands trembling. Only one person spoke, an older woman, gray hair, trembling lips. She had taken one of the hidden photos of Eva earlier. She stepped forward slow and hesitant. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know who you were." Eva turned to her eyes steady. "You still don't," she said. "But now, maybe you'll want to." Sometimes the loudest vindication comes not from shouting, but from standing still while the world unmasks itself. The room didn't recover. Not really. Nathaniel's presence hadn't just confirmed Eva's place, it had shattered the unspoken hierarchy everyone had clung to. Those who once whispered behind manicured hands now avoided eye contact. Those who had laughed now sank into their chairs, faces pale, as if the truth itself had scorched them. But Eva. She stood, not taller, just truer. Nathaniel, still at her side, looked over the guests like a man surveying a battlefield he had no joy winning. He squeezed Eva's hand once, then released it, stepping back, letting her speak. And she did. Finally. "I came here today knowing exactly what would happen," Eva said, voice even. "I knew the looks, the comments, the whispers behind phones. I've seen them before." She glanced toward Vanessa, who instinctively looked away. "I didn't come to prove anything to you. I came because Nathaniel asked me to witness something, to let you show yourselves." She stepped forward once. No podium, no fanfare, just presence. And you did. Her gaze moved across the room, calm but precise. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. The question now is not whether you accept me. It's whether you accept what you've become. Silence. Preston, sitting nearest the front, cleared his throat. "Eva." He began, voice tentative. "I want to apologize. I said things, cruel things. I was wrong. I thought you were here for the money." Eva turned her head slowly. "Would it have made a difference?" she asked. "If I were dressed differently? If my last name already matched yours?" He had no answer. Vanessa stood next, shaky. "I didn't mean to attack you. I thought we were protecting the family." Eva nodded. "And in doing so, you showed what kind of family this really is." Another silence, this time heavier. A young woman, someone who'd posted that early photo mocking Eva, rose slowly from the back. She held out her phone. "I deleted it," she said quietly. "The post, the photo. I'm sorry. It wasn't funny." Eva looked at her. No malice, no triumph, only truth. Apologizing for cruelty doesn't erase it, she said. But acknowledging it, that's where you begin. The woman nodded, lip trembling. She sat down. Across the room, small sounds began. Tissues pulled from handbags, shoes shifting awkwardly on marble. Some wept softly not for Eva, but for themselves, for what they'd revealed under the assumption they were safe to be unkind. And Nathaniel. He stood to the side, silent, watching, because this was no longer his fight. It never really was. At last, one final voice broke through. The older woman from before, gray-haired, the one who had taken a photo, stood again, her voice stronger now. "You showed us grace we didn't deserve," she said, "and it humbles me. I hope someday you might let us show you something better than who we were today." Eva offered her the faintest nod. That alone was forgiveness, not in words, but in release. Then she turned to Nathaniel. "I'm ready to leave," she said softly. He nodded. Together they walked toward the double doors. No drama, no glance back, just the quiet poise of two people who had nothing left to prove. And behind them, a room full of wealth, but suddenly empty of power. Sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel. Sometimes it only needs one person who refuses to bow to cruelty. Three weeks later, the Harwood estate was quiet again. The media had swarmed and then moved on. The photos had circulated, the think pieces written, the hashtags faded. But inside the estate, beneath the gold ceilings and velvet silence, real change was underway. Eva stood by the tall windows of Nathaniel's study, now hers. She wore no makeup, no designer suit, no show of triumph. Just the same linen dress, freshly washed, a new cardigan. Still herself, but something was different. She wasn't standing in the room anymore as a visitor. She was rooted. Across from her sat Douglas Granger, flipping through a revised set of documents. "As per your instructions," he said, "we've finalized the new trust. 50% of Nathaniel's holdings go toward the foundation you named." Eva nodded. "The Monroe Harwood Trust. Education, housing, medical debt relief, quiet help, the kind that leaves dignity intact." Douglas offered a small smile. "And the remaining assets," Eva looked out the window. The trees swayed gently. The air seemed clearer than the day of the reading. "I want the rest put under conditional stewardship," she said. "The family members who showed up that day, they'll be allowed to manage portions, but only if they meet the terms." Douglas arched a brow, which are, each one must spend a year working full-time in the service of others. No title, no salary, just time. If they refuse, their share goes back to the trust. Silence. Then Douglas closed the file with a quiet click. Spoken like someone who's never needed applause to feel powerful. Eva turned her eyes calm. "I don't want revenge. I want them to know how it feels to be unseen and choose to see others anyway," he nodded. "They'll never forget. They shouldn't," Eva said softly. "None of us should." Later that afternoon, as she walked through the East Gardens, she found herself face to face with someone unexpected. Vanessa, hair pulled back, no makeup, dressed in plain jeans and a navy blouse, her expression stripped of pride but not hope. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know. I applied to volunteer at the community center, the one on Belmont. I start Monday." Eva studied her for a moment. Why, Vanessa swallowed. "Because I think I've lived in rooms too long where no one ever challenged what I saw. You didn't yell, you didn't fight, and still, you shattered every version of myself I thought was fixed." Eva nodded once. "That's a start." Vanessa gave a short, trembling smile, then turned to leave. As she walked away, Eva called out gently, "Vanessa." She turned. "You don't owe me transformation," Eva said. "Just honesty. With yourself." Vanessa's eyes brimmed. She nodded and kept walking. Nathaniel joined her in the garden an hour later. He looked stronger now, thinner but steady. The cane was gone. "They're talking," he said, sliding his hand into hers. "I know." They're watching. I know. He paused. And you? She looked up at him. I'm no longer standing in anyone's shadow, she said. Not even yours. He kissed her temple. That's exactly where I hoped you'd land. They sat on the bench beneath the weeping willow. No reporters, no heirs, no audience. Just quiet. Just light. Real reform rarely arrives with fanfare. It comes in quiet conversations, small reckonings, and the kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. I never wanted the spotlight. Not when I married Nathaniel, not when I walked into that room, not even after they knew the truth. What I wanted was to be seen, not for my clothes, not for my silence, but for the choices I made when no one was watching. And maybe that's all any of us really want. To be seen not as the loudest, not as the wealthiest, but as enough. I think back to that note someone slipped into my bag. Charity case, it said. And they were right, but not in the way they meant. I've received charity, the kind that doesn't come with a tax deduction, the kind called mercy. I've given it too. Not out of pity, but out of understanding, because I know what it means to be dismissed, to be misnamed, misjudged, mistaken for someone small. But here's the secret they never tell you: your worth was never in their hands. Not the day they mocked you, not the day they apologized, not even today. It's yours. And maybe, just maybe, your quiet strength is the loudest truth in the room. Have you ever been underestimated, misjudged because of how you looked or how quietly you stood? If Eva's story reminded you of something in your own life, a moment you chose dignity over revenge, silence over spectacle, tell us in the comments. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today. And if this story moved you, consider subscribing. We tell true stories not just of survival, but of quiet triumph. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones no one saw coming. Thank you for watching, and remember, you don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be real.